Hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that keeps getting told off by its Year 9 geography teacher for talking about Final Fantasy VII when it's supposed to be learning about acid rain. I'm your host, Alex Greenwood, and joining me for the first time in 2025 is my co-host, Stu Jocelyn. Stu, how are you?
Good evening, Alex. Good evening, everybody. It's fantastic to be back. Happy 2025 and great to be back with you for more 90s nostalgia in 2025. And what a great topic we've got to get started as well. I can't wait to get stuck into this.
Yeah, I think going to school is probably the most nostalgic thing in most people's lives, isn't it? It's a thing that it's a period where we came of age, secondary school. So I think this is a really good topic for the pod, and it's long overdue. So I'm glad we're doing it today.
Absolutely. Although we do have to put quite a heavy disclaimer on this from my side of things, because I did only join secondary school, which is what we're specifically talking about tonight, in September 2000. So I hope you don't mind if we have a little bit of a bleed. I've tried to keep my memories and stories down to sort of year 7 only, basically, just to try and tie in with you guys, yourself and Adam, who's coming on to join us later. So hopefully that's okay. I had a word with Jeff, and it seems to be within the bounds of the contract and everything, what we're allowed to talk about. So we'll try and do that, and it should be fine.
As you allude to there will be a guest to deal with the earlier part of the decade. That is, of course, Adam Greenwood, brother of the pod, legend of the pod. And yes, he'll give us a bit of a lowdown from what it was like before our time, and that'll be really interesting.
He's way older than us, so yeah, it'd be good to get that viewpoint.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Before we go any further, though, today's episode is sponsored by the brand new Fruit Polos. If you head down to your local tuck shop and quote the code ALLRIGHT90s, you can get 5p off a pack of Fruit Polos or Citrus Sharp Polos. So be the envy of all your classmates by taking advantage of this offer, courtesy of Fruit Polos.
We've got the big dogs on board. We've got Polo on board. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? Yeah.
I was hoping that we might be able to get a deal for the holes in the middle of the polos that they did for a little while. But, I mean, Fruit Polos is a very, very good second prize.
It's definitely a sweet I associate with a period of secondary school age. So I think it was the perfect sponsor for this episode.
Definitely great to have them on board, and look forward to receiving our complimentary shipment to the office in due course. We will be looking at the bulletin board and getting into your post next time on the show, because we've got so much school chat to get into today. But just before we do that, we do have a couple of things to plug, haven't we, Alex, that are coming up soon that we'd like people to get involved with.
We do indeed, yes. Excitingly, we will be back for our, now regular Valentine's disco slot at the official pub of the pod, the 3 Crowns.
He's forgotten what it's called. I can't believe it. It's the official pub of the pod, and he's forgotten what it's called. Loyalty means nothing, clearly. I won't be able to show my face in there again.
I couldn't remember how many crowns it was. It's the 3 Crowns. The 3 Crowns in Chippenham, and we will be there on the...
And he doesn't know the date either. This is unbelievable. We will turn up. Is it just going to be me doing it, or what?
At this rate, it is, yeah.
We have been off for a little while, but I was expecting a little less ring rustiness than this, I have to say.
I know, it's poor, isn't it? It's poor. Hopefully the 3 Crowns aren't listening. Trust us, listeners, we will be bang on form when we are actually at the Wheels of Steel. It will not be this rusty, don't worry. But we will be at the 3 Crowns in Chippenham on the 15th of... on the 15th of February, 7 p.m. till late. And Stu will be doing all of the talking. Don't worry about that.
You're absolutely sure it's the 15th of February?
I think I am. That's what's in my calendar anyway.
Yes, everyone, it's our Valentine's disco. All joking aside, we would love to see you there if you are local to Chippenham. We'll be playing all of your favourite hits from the 90s, as well as some of our favourite choice cuts from the decade as well. And we will be showing Villa 3, Man United 1 from the 1994 League Cup final, and the Norwich Bayern Munich UEFA Cup game in full as well. So something to look forward to there. We'd love to see as many of you there as possible. Come on down and say hello.
Yeah, it's going to be a real treat. And that's not the only thing, is it, Stu? What else have we got to plug?
Well, we are guesting on another podcast in a couple of weeks' time with what are their names now? They came on the Christmas episode, and they've been on the Christmas episode every year with us for ever since we've been going. But I don't, yeah.
Catherine and Dan.
That's it, Catherine, and the podcast is called what's it called again? I can't keep this up any longer. We will be guesting on our good podcast friend Catherine and Dan's podcast, Now That's What I Call Bullshit. We're recording that in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about Now 43. There are so many great tracks on that compilation that we can't wait to discuss with them. So look out for that when that comes out. I mean, you should all be subscribed to Now That's What I Call Bullshit anyway, because it is a fine podcast, but we will be appearing on there soon. And yeah, we suggest you go over there and listen to that. You can listen to our previous appearances on there, and you can listen to their entire back catalogue as well, because they've had some great guests on there too. And it's just a fantastic listen. So we're looking forward to doing that. Time now for our first What's the Most 90s of the Year. This is one that's been sent in by a listener, so thanks so much to responding to our desperate plea for content ideas that we put out at the end of last year. This one comes in from our new friend Adam J. Fisher, and he's asked us to discuss what the most 90s petrol station is. This is a great one, I think. Alex, what have you got?
Yeah, really interesting question. I think this could be a prime example of something that I think we might be guilty of quite often on this podcast, which is thinking something is 90s just because it died out or was prominent in the 90s, but we don't realise it actually had been around for a long time before that, you know. But despite that, the choice I've gone for is the Fina petrol station, F-I-N-A, Fina. And that is because you just don't see them anymore. They did die out, if not in the 90s, then very shortly after the 90s. And also because I have a very personal set of memories related to Finas, which is that you could collect the Thunderbirds toys around the time that they was, you know, the new Thunderbirds craze, or the Thunderbird craze came back again, I should say. And I think they were maybe Matchbox, or at least that size. They did these die-cast molds for, I think, all 5 of the main Thunderbirds. And yeah, you just go in and collect tokens in a way that you could do back then. And we got at least 2 of them, and which is something we also got from another local petrol station, the Pickwick Motors on the A4 on the way to Chippenham. You could go in there and you could collect tokens, and you could get these brilliant Maestro or Maisto pullback cars, really good die-cast cars, and we got like 4 or 5 of them. And do petrol stations do that anymore? I don't think they do. I don't buy petrol. I don't have a car. But have you ever collected any tokens recently?
I haven't, no. Sadly, it seems to have died a death. Most petrol stations now will have adverts on the pumps for things that you can buy in the shop, and it's normally stuff like sunglasses or travel blankets or things that you might need on a journey. But no, I think the whole collection thing has died out. My dad, I know for a fact, has got a lovely completed album of football club crests from the sort of early to mid 70s, which he collected from Esso, I think. And they're lovely little foil stickers that he stuck in this album, which is still in my old bedroom cupboard, actually. So I get that out and look at it occasionally. But yet another thing that this podcast would want to see brought back is the petrol station collectible.
Yeah, definitely.
The overriding thing when you mention Fina is I think of BMW sports car racing.
Yes.
When
Very good, yes.
Joe Winkelhock won the BTCC in about 1993, he was driving for the Works BMW team sponsored by Fina and less prominently Warsteiner beer.
For me, it was the McLaren F1 of Le Mans and sports car fame that was sponsored by Fina quite prominently. So that's why I've gone for it. Elf would have been my second choice, I'll say that, but Fina is my number 1 choice. What about you?
Definitely an Elf, local Elf next to the Hungry Horse in Chippenham. That's come up before.
Yes,
I think maybe our previous correspondent George Alty had his motorcycle crash there, I think, didn't he? I think
and he sent us a picture,
Yes, indeed. Well, I've gone for, and it was at a location which you've mentioned. It's the petrol station where you collected your Maisto race cars, and that was a Q8 petrol station.
Q8, yeah, of course. I'd forgotten about Q8.
And it was only researching this that I've realised, of course, say it again, Q8.
Q8.
It's a Q80 company, and I'm 36 years old, and I've only just figured that out. So maybe I shouldn't be in charge of this podcast. I don't know, but
I didn't find that out until recently as well.
But the forecourt is still there. It's now an MOT place called Pickwick Motorworks. But yeah, that is just another brand that, as you say, is sort of gone the way of Fina. It's a disappearing brand. I think there are still some dotted about. I think it's more of a sort of foreign concern now than it maybe is in the UK. It stopped being a petrol station probably in the early 2000s, I think. It's been like a garage and forecourt for quite some time now, as opposed to a petrol station. My abiding memory of the Q8 petrol station in Corsham is the first time that I became aware of there being a sort of... it was either a petrol shortage or something. No, it must have been a petrol shortage, actually, because people were queuing. The Q8 must have had...
Yeah, I remember
Must have had petrol.
Yeah.
And they were queuing there. And get this, people were queuing for it, and it was £1.50 a litre. And they'd hiked the prices because there was obviously supply and demand. And, to a whole one... And people were outraged about it being £1.50 a litre. I remember that. And look where we are now, not too far off that as a standard.
Well, there are our choices. Adam, who gave us the idea, he has given us his suggestion, actually, for what the most 90s petrol station is. And he says, I'm going Texaco, mainly because my parents frequented it a lot and I was seduced by the exotic name, imagining the massive oil fields in America. I also got a promotional toy, here we go again, a promotional toy Texaco oil wagon. Catch them whilst they're young. Another comment about petrol stations back then is that they were often located in some high-end real estate in city centres. Some were also smashed between rows of terrace houses. Plenty of pleasant memories of those places, especially if my mum would come back from the kiosk with a packet of Merlin Premier League 1994 stickers. Amen to that. Nothing
Absolutely
more exciting
fantastic.
than seeing your parent come back from the paying for the petrol at the in the shop and coming back with something in the hand that you know, like whether it's football stickers or a Cadbury's Dairy Milk or something like that. That was always just the best.
Mm-hmm. I mean, my relationship with the Corsham Texaco is obviously well documented, and that was where I got the Mark Bosnich sticker for the Panini PFA 97 album, which remains one of my favourite childhood memories because I'd been aching for that sticker and I finally got it, and that was on that Texaco forecourt. So.
Yeah, it's nice to have a personal connection to these petrol stations, isn't it? But before that was Texaco, that was of course the Jet petrol station, which is another very 90s petrol station brand, the Jet.
Well, all that said, I think it might come down to the motorsport livery connection, as it so often does on this podcast. And I think FINA might be in pole position here, if you'll pardon the expression, because I just think it's got that prestige about it that it gets lent from the motorsport angle. But I don't know what you think. Strong contenders all round.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure, Stu, because I think with Q8, you've hit that nostalgia nail on the head. You've achieved that sort of primary goal of nostalgia, and certainly this podcast, of you said something that made me go, oh yeah, I've forgotten about that. And that's exactly what we want from nostalgia. So for me, it's got to be Q8 based on that alone.
Well, if you're happy with that, I'm more than content to take the win. So we'll put Q8 in the ledger. Thanks so much to Adam for writing in. Sorry Texaco didn't take the crown this time, but that's the way What's the Most 90s goes, isn't it? We never know quite know what's going to happen. And we are, of course, judge, jury and executioner in all counts. So it ends with us. But thanks, Adam, for writing in. And anybody out there listening who's got any ideas for any other What's the Most 90s subjects for us to discuss and wants to follow suit, get in touch using the details that we'll read out at the end of the show. And Q8, if you're listening and you have any spare oil money that you'd like to throw our way, then we'd be more than happy to accept it.
Time now to put on our school uniform and head to the school gates as we talk about secondary school in the 90s. And joining us on our journey along the bustling corridors of the 90s secondary school is returning guest and legend of the pod, it's brother of the pod, Adam Greenwood. Adam, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Thanks for having me back.
Hi, mate. Good to have you back on. Still waiting for my call up to Jimmy's Crickets, but we'll talk about that later.
Sure, yeah.
Well, this is obviously a big topic. This is one of the most nostalgic times in anyone's life, so I think it's a good time to talk about it. But we all went to secondary school at slightly different times, didn't we? Because we all at different ages. So I went to secondary school 1996 to 2003. That includes sixth form. What about you, Adam?
I think I started in 94 and then obviously went all the way through to sixth form.
Yeah,
so I would have left in 2000, I think.
I think you actually started in 93 because...
Oh, do I?
I seem to remember our logins on the computer were sort of like our name and then the year we started, wasn't it? It was like 96A Green or something for me. I seem to remember yours being 93. I don't know how I remember that, but I think...
I can't remember that at all. It's amazing you can remember mine and I can't even remember mine.
Yeah, I don't know why these things stick in my mind, but 93, yeah. The same year as Jurassic Park and The Chronic by Dr. Dre. Those three things, 93. Stu, what about you?
00S Jostle right here. So, yeah, September 2000 for me. So I joined just as Adam would have left, and obviously enjoyed, I should say, a few years crossover with you, Alex. Mm-hmm. And yeah, left in 2007 when I finished sixth form. Sorry, can I just get rid of this jacket here? Sorry, it's a bit warm in here.
For listeners' benefit, Stuart has taken off his zip-up hoodie to reveal that he is wearing a Corsham school uniform. Period accurate. Is that your actual school tie there?
This is the actual tie. I don't remember ever owning another tie, so I think this is the one that I had throughout the uniform years. Not the same shirt, though. This is a different white shirt. But yeah, I just thought I should bring this out to mark the occasion.
Oh, that is fantastic. I wish I'd done that now. I got to see if I've got my tie. I must have my tie in the cupboard somewhere. I was also a one-tire. Never had to replace mine. Because I think in some places, is it the UK, maybe it's America, or it must be the UK, where people cut their ties up on the last day. That's the thing, isn't it? Not at our school, but...
Yeah, I think that's a sort of a big thing over there. I know they do it in basketball. I think the nets are cut down when the college players play their last game or something, or one of them's going to go on to go in the NBA or something. They cut the nets off. So I think it must be a thing that pervades in American culture. But yeah, no, not here. No, this is the OG, and I've still got it, and I don't think you'll ever find me cutting it up.
Adam, do you still have your tie somewhere?
I do somewhere. I actually think I've got a school friend's tie, because the tie that I had was a hand-me-down, and it was sort of comically wide, like a bordering on being like a kipper tie. And my friend loved it so much, found it so amusing, that I thought at the end of the year I will trade it with him. He can take this home, and I'll have his tie.
Yeah, I forgot actually that some people had wider ties. Like, I guess they were just from an early era. I guess from the 70s probably. Just some of them still knocking about. Right, so yeah, we kind of spanned the whole decade almost. A good 7 years of it at least. Let's describe the building itself for listeners, because this will probably be quite a common sort of school, I think, for a lot of people in the UK. Stu, do you want to describe how it looked aesthetically and architecturally?
I certainly can. So to enter Corsham School, the entrance was actually at the end of, or still is, at the end of a road in Corsham called the Tynings. So you travel all the way down the Tynings, which is just a regular sort of residential street. And then right at the end of the Tynings is the main entrance to Corsham School. And as you go through this entrance, you will see then the main entrance to S Block Hall. If there is such a thing as a marquee building of Corsham School, then I would say that S Block is definitely it. S Block is the big one, isn't it? It's the behemoth. And then there was also T Block, H Block, L Block, which was the library block. And then when I joined, R Block was added during my time as a student, which was named after Clive Richards, more of whom later. And that led to most of my early education at Corsham School being carried out in a series of mobile classrooms, because these mobile classrooms have been brought in and put on the field to deal with the oversubscription of students while the new block was being built. So, yeah, I would say a fairly regular set of school buildings, but S Block was like I say, the main sort of building in the school. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was the 3-story building, I think, wasn't it, on the whole campus, as it were. Because there were 4 blocks, and I think they were all sort of late 60s, early 70s style. That classic, if you picture a 90s secondary school, that's what ours was like, wasn't it? It had those sort of, that size window, the sandstone bricks and concrete. It actually opened in 1972 in its current form. So that kind of gives you an indication of the period that the architecture dated from. And it was surrounded by playing fields and playgrounds of various sizes. Actually, it had huge playing fields, didn't it? I don't know how that compares to other schools, but lots of outdoor space.
I think they must have been the original curtains in S Block from 1972 as well, when I joined, were still there. These sort of orange and brown curved patterns. Yeah, and they were there for a long time, even after I joined. So I was actually quite upset when they got rid of them. I quite liked them, but there we go.
I wonder what happened to them. They must have been such a fire hazard of that era. I can just imagine them sort of putting them on a bonfire to get rid of them, and then just instantly vaporizing.
Yeah, there was smog around the area for miles around, just with all of the chemicals that have been used in their manufacture.
So what were your experiences of the school before you actually joined the school then? Adam, what about you?
I think we went on a day where we went and sort of had a look around, sort of familiarise ourselves with the layout of the building and stuff. I don't remember a huge amount about it. I know that when I finally got there, I was sort of nervous about being there, possibly because there was the rumour that you could be bog flushed at any time. I don't know if this was sort of a universal thing, but there was always the fear that either bigger kids or older kids would put your head down the toilet and flush it, and I think a lot of us sort of lived with that sort of in the back of our mind. That was the main thing that I had in my head before we went.
Yeah, I definitely remember that same fear. I still went in with that as a thing that happened when he went to secondary school. Like, everyone was kind of a potential bully or at least a threat, and yeah, flushing your head down the toilet was something that would happen if you just looked at someone the wrong way. But it never happened to me. Stu, what were your experiences of the school before you went?
Well, I mean, having gone back to work at Corsham School for a long time, which I'm very grateful to have been able to do a little while ago, I know that now primary school students start coming up to the school so much earlier to get familiarised with it. I think it's year 5 that they start doing that now. I don't remember there being that many sort of lead-in days, maybe 2 or 3 days. I remember doing something called fractal patterns in a maths classroom with a teacher called Mrs. Thrower. I have a clear recollection of that, and not being able, and not being able to sort of get the hang of it, and thinking, oh dear, well, if this is a standard that's expected, then I don't really have a hope in hell. So I wasn't worried about bullying or anything like that. I was more worried about the step up from primary school, if you like, and sort of being able to hit the mark that way. The main person who was to be feared, and I'm sure that both of you will have been through this as well, was definitely Clive Spooner Richards. He was the main man, the one by which all other school fears would be adjudged. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he was definitely the one that most of the sort of rumours and big talk centred around in the lead up to me joining school. I don't know if that was the same for you.
Yeah, I had, I don't know who we'd picked this up from, but yeah, there was the general idea that he was the teacher to be frightened of. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if I saw this or if it's just sort of an imagined memory, but did he used to stand on one of the roofs during any of the break times and sort of shout at any child who hadn't got their shirt tucked in?
See, I remember him doing things like that, but sadly not on a roof. That would have been very memorable. But I remember him having a loud hailer that he would use to address people with during sort of high traffic times, like, break times, people going home, queuing for buses, that sort of thing. He would then take out the loud hailer and start addressing people.
Yeah, teachers standing on the roof with a loud hailer shouting at the students as an adult seems absolutely incredible.
I wish I'd seen that. I really wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, in terms of my memories before I joined, I also had an induction week like you both mentioned. But I remember going for one of Adam's parents' evenings, so it's before I went to school, and it was in the evening and it was dark, so it must have been in the winter. And I remember that being the first time I'd actually been into the building, and it was all, as I say, dark, and it was quiet because there weren't many people around. And I just remember thinking, but the corridors just seemed massive and wide, and there was no sort of decoration or anything. Like in primary school, you know how pretty much every wall and every bit of space, even the corridors, is kind of nicely decorated. There's maybe bookcases, there's displays, there's things on the wall, maybe comfy chairs, bean bags. But in this secondary school corridor, it was just like utilitarian. It was just to funnel hundreds of kids around in between lessons, and it really felt like this is a different environment that I'm going to be going into, when I'm old enough. And that was my first distinct memory of the place. Okay, so that's what we experienced before we joined, but when it came to actually joining, do either of you remember your first day? Because I don't really remember it, but do either of you remember your first day or your first week?
I do, yes. Well, I remember bits of my first day. I remember having forgotten almost everything that I had been told in the year 6 run-up days in the summer, and walking down, lucky enough to live very close to school, so it was about a 3 or 4 minute walk from my parents' house And I remember walking in, and Diamond Joe Barter of this parish had stopped by on his way because his route to school passed my house. So he would often stop by my house, and then we would walk down together. And we sort of paired up for that first day in. And neither of us could really remember where we were supposed to go or anything about it. And the lady who came to our rescue was a maths teacher, you might remember, Mrs. Robson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
who I then, of course, came to know who that was later. But we sort of asked her, "Oh, do you know where we need to go?" And she signposted us. We eventually found our tutor room, which was S30, which was on the aforementioned top floor of S Block, and possibly one of the most unloved and underused classrooms in the entire school. And that continued on, I can tell you, during my time there as a staff member. But we had that was the debut of my orange Umbro bag as well, first day in year 7, the famous orange Umbro Italia rucksack, first day in year 7, no bands written on it then. But yeah, that was its first day. And I remember Joe had a nice red head rucksack as well, brand new out of the bag for the first day. But yeah, there was a bit of panic when we didn't really know where we were supposed to go. I've also, on that theme, got a little story about our first lesson, which I might have told before on the pod, I don't know, but as it would happen, and I'm not sure this would again happen now, but as I remember it, first lesson, Monday, period 1, the first day, was swimming. Can you believe
awful.
that?
That is awful.
I mean, it doesn't get much worse, does it, for a first lesson? So our first lesson wasn't even on the school site, and for that, absolute chaos. We knew it wasn't on the site, but we didn't know if we were supposed to go straight to the Springfield or if we were supposed to wait or what. I can't remember which option we chose, but it ended up with the lesson starting late and Mr. Threlfall having a bit of a go at everyone because we'd messed it up for swimming on our first lesson. So I'm glad that things have moved on, that I don't think that would happen now. But yeah, that's one that sticks in the mind as well.
Literally in at the deep end.
I like it. Yes, indeed.
Adam, what about you? Do you remember your first day?
I don't think so. I have a memory of one of my, someone who then went on to be one of my best friends at school, him being in our tutor group and having been separated from all of his friends from primary school and him crying, and me and my friend from Regis sort of taking him under our wing a little bit and sort of reassuring him that it would be fine. But I feel like that could have been in the induction week possibly. But my main sort of memory, I guess, was just feeling like everyone else knew what they were supposed to be doing and I didn't, which I think is just how I felt probably for maybe forever.
I was going to say I'm 36 and that's still the pervading feeling in the workplace and on the podcast and everywhere else.
So let's talk about more general stuff then, stuff that maybe people who didn't go to school in Northwest Wiltshire in 93 to 2000 might actually be able to identify with a bit.
Well, we don't want them listening. Why are they even listening?
And by this point, whatever episode we're on now, there's probably not that many of them.
I love you all. I didn't mean that. I love you all greatly.
Lunchtimes then. What were lunchtimes like at secondary school, in our experience at least?
I didn't have cooked dinners. I remember just taking sandwiches in with me and they would be most often sort of, I would have to really fight the urge not to eat them all at the first break time. But I did know some friends who would buy stuff in the canteen, so you sort of would sit with them while they were eating their chips or whatever. I'm not sure how long the actual lunchtime was.
It was always 40 minutes for me. 1 o'clock till 1:40. Tutor time 1:40 till 2. Period 5, 2 o'clock.
Yeah. Long enough to have something to eat and then go out and sort of join in with a football game that was happening on the playing fields.
Mm-hmm.
So is that how you spent your lunchtime then after you'd eaten, would be to go and play football?
I think so, yeah. If there was a match happening, I would try and join in with that. I don't really remember doing much else.
This was something I was going to touch on in this episode, was that leisure time activities, what you could and couldn't do. Because when you're at primary school, your lunchtimes are all about playing tag or playing bulldog or stuck in the mud or whatever, and you were running around. Everyone was just running around like crazy. You can always tell the sound of a primary school when you walk past it at lunchtime, because it just sounds like absolute bedlam. But when you get to secondary school, it's all different, isn't it? Like we were told in advance, I guess this was knowledge passed down by the elders. You can't play tag at secondary school. That is off the cards big time because
that's an instant bug flushing.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Stu, what about you? What were you doing on your lunch breaks?
Packed lunch guy, always a packed lunch guy. Never really did the canteen thing. What I remember most about my lunches is normally eating them in the aforementioned S Block Hall with the sixth form dinner monitors, who by this point obviously could be paid to be there and earn some money by doing some dinner monitoring, seeming impossibly old and cool. Like, there must have been obviously 17, 18-year-olds at this point, and to an 11-year-old that seems an unobtainable level of cred and cool. But one of the guys I remember quite well was a guy called, this might be a familiar name to you guys, I don't know, Martin Bader. Was a guy who did it and is now quite a successful DJ, as it turns out. Whose name I've sort of kept an eye on over the years. So maybe we can get him on the show at some point to talk about his experiences at Corsham School and beyond. But yeah, the lunchtimes normally in the hall. Didn't really get involved in much lunchtime football or anything like that. Save that for the park. But yeah, it was the impossibly old and cool sixth form dinner monitors that stick out for me.
Mm-hmm. We would usually be found in the outside picnic bench area. There were two dinner halls you could choose from, one at the top of the school, one at the bottom, but in the middle was the one place you were allowed to eat outside of the school.
Yes. And
it was these picnic benches, and that's where we would go. Unless it was absolutely tipping it down, the nerds, as was the group that I was a part of, we would go and stand there and eat our skips and stuff. But I don't think I knew anyone who had hot dinners. It was kind of an alien concept to me. I think, as I said in the primary school episode, the one time I ever had school dinners was my first day at primary school, when I didn't know whether I was supposed to have hot dinners or packed lunch, and just aimlessly wandered into the dinner hall. But yeah, that wasn't something we did. And then, yeah, football was something that came along probably a little bit later, right at the end of the 90s, probably when we were year 9 or 10. Often with a tennis ball against the wall. On a good day, someone might bring in a bouncy ball and you would just fling that around and sort of go slightly mad. But as I say, no tag, none of that. Although we did secretly play a game, probably year 7 and 8, which was like a hybrid of tag and hide and seek, where half of you would go off and just hide somewhere in the whole school, and the other half would try and find them. And it could just go on forever, because it's obviously a massive campus, so people would just be like hiding in an upstairs toilet for 40 minutes of their lunch break, and then then go to their next lesson. But that was it. You couldn't run. That was the thing. You couldn't be seen to be running. So if you saw someone, you'd have to just sort of quickly stroll after them, and then they would start quickly strolling away from you. But you couldn't run, because then you'd be bullied for being a little kid who was still trying to play tag. And it's horrible, really. All this sort of bullshit self-policing that we did as kids. Like, I think I just can't stand it. But yeah, that was the rule of the schoolyard back then. I mean, it's probably no better now, but we'll come on to that in a bit.
If I might be just permitted to sum that up.
Go on.
People would spend their lunch breaks playing a site-wide game of hide and seek, which they had 40 minutes to play, and nobody was allowed to run.
Yes. Yeah. So it was, yeah.
Isn't that
we
something?
worked it out. I remember discovering the toilets on the level 3 of the S block near your tutor group, and that being absolutely prime sort of hiding spot, because no one, I don't think anyone else knew they were even there. So that saw me through a few lunch breaks. What about food then? Like the tuck shop, for example. What was everyone eating? What was everyone buying from the tuck shop?
I really remember this being the point when whoever manufactures polo mints were sort of trying out a few different variations on the classic. So there was like the spearmint one, which I think was a particularly good one, fruit ones, and there might have even been gummy ones at this point. But those are the things that really stick out in my memory, apart from chomp bars and wham bars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our sponsors tonight, our sponsors this evening. Brilliant. That's almost like a sponsor read you've done there, Adam. Superb.
Stu, what about you? So that was near the beginning of the decade. Had it changed by the turn of the millennium?
I remember being amazed that there were vending machines in the canteen, in the S Block canteen, and I remember being amazed that you could buy cans of fizzy pop basically at any time of day. Also, the Clicks machine where you could get hot drinks. I don't think the level of trust is there to have that in a canteen available to all anymore. But I remember quite liking, and I was the only one who did like it. But you could get, it was obviously a tea, coffee, hot chocolate thing, but you could also get a cold Starburst drink in either orange or raspberry, and everybody else hated it, but I quite liked it. And you used to get this like silt at the bottom, where obviously the powder that this stuff is manufactured from used to settle in the bottom. So that's my buying food at school experience. Really, like I say, I wasn't a big hot dinner or tuck shop guy. I also remember there being quite some alarm. Again, it's sort of adjacent to bog flushing, but I remember one kid having annoyed some other kid and getting their bag taken from them and thrown behind the vending machines in S Block Hall. And it was like, the rumour was like, oh, well, they need to call someone out to move it because it's so heavy and it's got all his homework in there and they'll never get it back and all this sort of thing. So that was another thing then that you had to be wary of, that your bag didn't get launched behind a vending machine.
You sure
that was one?
Maybe that's what the silt was in the Starburst drink.
No, possibly, yeah.
Getting chewed up by the machine. I was very much part of Generation Wham as well. The Wham bar and the Tangy. I can't find any real sign of this online. Does anyone else remember the Tangy? It's the same as a Wham bar in terms of being like a chewy stick, but it was green. I think the packet was green and yellow. They were a bit smaller than Wham bars, but they tasted really good. But they were like, everyone was buying them for all of year 7 and 8, I think. But then they just seemed to disappear. Anyone remember them?
Were they sort of like a sweet and sour lemon and lime type thing?
I think so, yeah. Tangy Toms, that was the crisp. Tangy Toms and Space Raiders, of course, but Tangy Toms were vastly superior. And I think the tuck shop didn't actually last that long for me. Stu, was it there when you were at school? It was an H Block Hall that I remember. There was like a table in the corner staffed by a dinner lady, and you would just put some money in a pot and get your Tangy Toms.
Quite possibly, but the one I remember more, and I think it's still there, is the Snack Shack, which is a great name, which was instituted in your favoured dining area, the sort of outside picnic tables, and they just put a wooden shed basically in that area with a serving hatch, and then someone would go in there at break time and lunchtime and serve from the Snack Shack. So that, I think, is the successor to the Tuck Table in H Block Hall, which I remember a bit more clearly. Yeah.
Possibly a future sponsor for the podcast there, the Snack Shack.
Oh, definitely. I think we can talk to them. Yeah, I've still got some contacts over there. Yeah, I think we can get something sorted out. Leave that one with me.
Yeah, I imagine their marketing budget would stretch to this podcast just about.
Crime and punishment, then, is our next topic, and how you were dealt with if your behaviour didn't come up to standard. I was, like I say, quite frightened of people like Mr. Taylor Beasley, Mr. Richards, so I was not one to cause a lot of trouble, but I do remember getting involved in a whole class detention pretty soon after my ascent into secondary school. This was with Mrs. Wheels, the languages teacher. You must both remember her with fondness, I would imagine. I think she was there for quite some time. And there was something to do with there was a rumour or something that if you had cooking earlier that day, a cookery lesson, and you'd left what you'd made in the classroom, you could go back, you could leave your last lesson of the day 5 minutes early so that you could go down and collect your cooking before the bell went, and then you wouldn't miss your bus or anything like that. And there was some sort of situation whereby the class just sort of all got up and left with about 5 minutes to go and collect the cooking, and Mrs. Wheels was none the wiser, and then decided to sort of punish everybody the next. I think, fortunately for her, our next lesson in there was either before break time or before lunchtime, so we all got kept in afterwards. But I'd sort of been swept along with it, and I'd felt like it would have been worse if I'd been the only one sort of left there and not done it. I feel like I had to sort of go with the group. Was probably the lesser of two evils. And I also remember that the Brit Awards were on that night, and I watched the Brit Awards worrying about what was going to happen after this sort of mass insurrection in the German classroom. I think you too might have got a Lifetime Achievement Award that night. So yeah, generally a good guy at school, because I just I didn't really want to get involved with any punishments or anything like that. But that's one that I remember, is the whole class detention from Mrs. Wheels. Yeah. Were you involved in any sort of famous incidents that are still talked about, or anything that went down in legend?
I don't think I was. I think I was quite well behaved, really. Sort of too scared to really act up, and not cool enough to be a bad boy in any way at that point. So yeah, I don't really remember any sort of serious punishments. I think someone got hit on the head with a tennis racket by a PE teacher once, but that's probably an unofficial punishment rather than anything.
Yeah, I never really had any serious infractions, and therefore...
we're all so boring. Christ.
But the detention was new for secondary school, wasn't it? Like, you didn't get detention in primary school, I don't think. Or maybe lunchtime detention, but the sort of mythical after-school detention, that was not a primary school thing. But it did happen at secondary school, but I don't remember anyone... I never had it. But I don't remember many other people being hit with that punishment. Do you remember that happening?
I can't say I do. No, I mean,
the teacher just wouldn't want to do it, would they? So
yeah, because they have to then sort of hang around as well.
So you probably have to be pretty bad to get that. But the methods of sort of policing used by the teachers, I think in the primary school episode I talked about having a black book in the school that the teachers would put your name in. But I remember at secondary school they introduced a new system shortly after we joined, I think, where if you were naughty they would write your name up on the board. If you were naughty again they would put a tick next to it. If you were naughty again they would put a tick next to it. And then at some point they would say, like, if you get another tick then you'll get sent out of the room, or you get sent to the head or something. And that was the system that was used, I think, for the rest of my time at school. And I mean, it kind of worked, but you'd also get you'd get lessons where it was sort of so out of control that everyone's name would be up there. It'd just be ticks, and it would sort of start to lose its power.
The one thing I do remember happening, and I don't think I was in that class at the time, was one of the newish, for me anyway, would have been there when you were there, I guess, science teachers got locked in his own store cupboard by the class. The idea of that sort of terrifies me. The idea of being a teacher where you command so little respect that you're at risk of being locked in your own store cupboard, stationery cupboard. I don't remember what the punishment was for that. Maybe he couldn't punish anyone because he didn't know who had done it.
It's a classic example of having to punish the whole class unless someone owns up, isn't it?
One thing I wanted to ask you two is, did you have any notable sort of end-of-year trips or rewards from the teachers, sort of watching a film or that sort of thing? Because I seem to remember, the one that I remember specifically was going ice skating. And I think we were sort of the last year group to do that because someone slipped over and knocked their teeth out. But I feel like there were trips to the cinema and like a TV being wheeled into the gym to watch Batman Forever and things like that. Do you have any sort of notable end-of-term outings or anything?
There was one Christmas a bit later on, I remember, where the last day before Christmas was always just basically a film day. And I later found out, you might want to edit this out, but in later years, I found out that the last Thursday before the end of term was always the staff Christmas night out, which might explain why it was filmed day on a Friday. But anyway, last Friday before Christmas was always a film day. And the night before, the last, whatever Pirates of the Caribbean it was, had been on TV for the first time. So I watched that with my parents, and then the film the day after in school was that exact same Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Fortunately, I had a biography of Keith Richards in my bag, so I asked if I could be allowed to sit at the back of the hall by a window where there was some light and just read my book instead, and I was allowed to do that. Fucking hell.
Could you practically make me want to dunk your head down the toilet?
I'll get Beth to bog flush me before bed tonight. How about that?
Right then, shall we talk about trends? Whether that's slang terms or toys people were bringing in or fashions for mufti days and things like that? What were the trends of your day?
I remember kickers were the shoes that everyone had to have or everyone wanted to have. Those very distinctive ones with the sort of pie crust. I always thought like Cornish pasty thing around the toe. I don't know how you can describe it. A crimped toe, which became sort of affectionately referred to as piss catchers once we got a little bit older. Which is quite an evocative name for them. But I remember those were the shoes you had to wear. And I do remember for sort of school discos, certainly for the first couple of years, or mufti days, which I assume is what they were all called. Was it called mufti day?
They were for us, but we all went to the same school, so it's
that must be. It must be a universal name. I'm sure it must be. The thing that everyone, or the boys anyway, would wear, and this was sort of came from the top down in terms of the most popular boy said this is what he was going to wear, and so everyone else sort of attempted to copy it, was some sort of long sleeve roll neck top with a football shirt over the top, and then chinos, and then whatever trainers they had, presumably like the most, like the best trainers that they could possibly have. And I have a distinct memory that would have been around the time that the Manchester United half green, half yellow shirt with the sort of, I don't know how you describe that colour. I always thought it sort of looked vaguely medieval.
Like a lace-up collar.
Yeah, that's lace-up collar. I remember that being the sort of quite an ugly football kit to be worn as with the rest of those clothes.
A
Yeah,
long sleeve roll neck with a football shirt on top.
Yeah, it was very specific. It was those things. I remember sort of people talking about like, what are you going to wear? And everyone would be saying, oh, I'm going to wear a roll neck, chinos, and a football shirt, as if. And then everyone would be saying the same thing. It sort of seemed a bit pointless to be having the discussion in the first place. It was almost just going around making sure that everyone was going to be on brand.
I think that had stopped by the time I went. I don't remember that being a fashion in '96 onwards.
Yeah, it was sort of first and second year, I think. Might have even stopped in the second year, but definitely in the first year.
Stu, what about the end of the decade? What were people wearing on mufti days?
Well, it was, just to extrapolate on the kickers theme there, it was bootleg by the time that we were there. So that was the Clark's school shoe division, which was actually quite cool for Clark's, to be fair. That sort of school shoe division of theirs was the must-have by then. Non-uniform days, I think they sort of thinned out actually towards the end. Really, I don't remember it really happening an awful lot, I have to be honest, but towards that time I remember having a nice pair of Elasi, that Italian brand that you don't see anymore, trainers that a girl called Rosie Watts stamped on within about 4 minutes of me entering the school site, and got mud all over them, and I was very, very upset about that, I remember.
What did you do to deserve that?
Nothing really. But she did that sort of thing to everyone, so there you go. That's again, I don't wish to defame Rosie Watts wherever she is. I'm sure she's doing fine, but that was what happened. I'm here to deal in facts.
She's almost certainly in prison. Let's be honest.
What sort of sentence does that carry? Once you're a juvenile.
She'll be in juvie hall probably for a good 6 months, I reckon, for that.
Yeah.
So she's probably out now, but.
And body warmers, by the way. Year 7 body warmers were big.
Body warmers? What do you mean, like a gilet?
Yeah, if you like. Yeah.
Well, that's weird. Again, the fashion had changed from the start of the decade to the middle of the decade to the end of the decade, because I don't think people were wearing that much when I was mid-decade. It was sportswear until the turn of the millennium. Then it became you couldn't wear sportswear because that would make you a townie or a scally, which was our term for chav, really. So it was all very problematic.
Yeah.
But it was seen as like, this is what the wrong sort of person to wear, so you can't wear sportswear. But that was the end of the decade. In the mid-decade, it was all Adidas poppers and Kappa stuff and LS, like you say, or whatever equivalent there was down the market. Mercury trainers and such like.
Knicks.
Yeah, Knicks. Yeah, God,
Fantastic.
Great stuff. What about language and terminology? What big terms were being used? Actually, I'll go first. Because Gert Lush has become like a cliche, and it's been reclaimed in a bit of an ironic way, and it's sort of hard to imagine that this was ever used non-ironically in its original form. But it was like at the start of my school days, Gert Lush was what everyone was saying for something that was good. In a Wiltshire accent, of course. Gone by the time I left school. Yeah, it was all Gert Lush. There was scab if you were like trying to get food of someone else or begging for food. That became like a term of shame. You didn't want to be seen to be a scab. Itchy chin if you didn't believe something. You get that itchy chin, yeah. Oh, my chin's itchy, itchy chin. And again, another thing that was just everywhere for a year or so and then gradually died out. Frills. You would say that sarcastically if someone was getting too excited about something. Another example of self-policing and in that horrible way that you had at secondary school where people weren't allowed to, especially boys, weren't allowed to show any sort of excitement about anything or be effusive about anything. If they were, you would say, oh, frills, sarcastically, and that would sort of burst their balloon and you'd go back to being monosyllabic and grumpy.
Keener was one that was like a big thing,
course,
which is sort of similar to what you were just saying, where it was sort of discouraged, it was sort of frowned upon to be enthusiastic or seem to be trying at anything or be good at anything at school other than sports. I think if you were good at sport, that was the best thing you could do. But if you were good or enthusiastic about anything else, then you were keen. And bog flushing.
So Keener had undergone some sort of a metamorphosis then by the time, or maybe it was my year group that did it, I don't know, but it sort of metamorphosed into Beaner. So I don't know how that happened, but I remember Beaner being there. Big one in the early years was White Fang.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So you couldn't, as I am now, of course, I am not wearing the school jumper, but if you had your collar showing over the crew neck of your jumper, then that was a heinous offence, and you would be known as White Fang. And also the peanutting of the tie, although I suppose this isn't really, we're not really talking about language here, we're talking about things that people who did bog flushing would do, but it was known as the peanutting of the tie, where the tie would be grabbed and the knot would be shoved up the neck as far as it could go. So yeah, those are the big two I remember. But I can't believe I didn't write Keener or Beaner down actually, because that was obviously so big. There was one kid as well who generated his own thing, and I think he misheard something in an art lesson, and started calling people flatheads if they were. "Come on, you flathead," and that became his thing to say. His insult. I think he'd received some feedback in an art lesson, like, "Oh, your character there's got a bit of a flat head," and he thought it was funny because he was dull, and then that's how it generated from there. So you'll know who I'm talking about if you're listening, guys.
I quite admire that.
You can print that as well. I'm not taking that back. He was dull.
I quite admire that. I think the confidence, the self-confidence to just come up with your own insult and just use it, even if no one else is using it, is.
Fair play for that. Yeah, I suppose. Fair play for that.
I think the big word that we haven't said so far, and is more serious, obviously, and it has come up in other podcasts we've done, is of course the word gay. That was so widely used in my time. It was like you couldn't go 10 minutes without someone calling someone else gay or calling something gay or accusing someone of being gay. It's just a pejorative term. So depressing. Like I didn't really see it as so much of a problem then, because I was I don't know 12, and it was just so normal, and I wouldn't have considered myself homophobic at all. But I just thought I would, I was guilty of it as much as anyone else. So a source of shame looking back. But yeah, God, it was absolutely everywhere. Was that still going on for you, Stu, and had it started when you were there, Adam?
It was like a big thing when I was there. Like the worst thing you could be was gay or a woman. If you said stop being a woman about something, that was like one of the worst things you could say to someone.
I think I've covered this before, so I won't spend too much time going over it here. But I think by the time I joined, the character Ali G was was in his pomp, in his heyday, and there was a term that character used, which then in turn started to get used in our secondary school time in place of the word gay. And I won't repeat the term here because I wouldn't feel comfortable saying it. But that was unfortunately still quite prevalent, and a mark of where culture was at the time, and hopefully we've moved on slightly, but I'm not sure we've moved on that much, which is obviously a big shame.
Rather than ending that section on such a downer, I'll just ask you to whether you'd have occasional hysterical events where someone would discover that someone had smeared poo on one of the bathroom walls. Is that something that happened in every school every now and again? That was a thing, wasn't it?
Oh God, yeah, it was, wasn't it? It was the boys' changing rooms. I seem to remember regularly there was a thing where someone had done it, and no one ever knew who it was, but it seemed to have happened more than once. And I remember thinking, do I know someone who would do that? They walk among us, like these people who are prepared to smear poo on the inside of a toilet door.
Yeah.
I don't think I did experience this, and I'm all the happier for it. I think maybe, let's say somebody once did something in a urinal that really should have been done in a toilet, but I think that's the sum total of that sort of thing.
Was that done, do you think, as an act of protest or as an act of desperation?
Possibly, possibly both. I'm not sure. Could have been either, but no, I'm not too sure about that. I thought you said we were going to end on a lighter note, Alex.
Yeah, we've ended on a dark brown note, haven't we? No, the final question I'm going to ask
depends what you've been eating, I suppose.
Yeah, how many wham bars have you had?
Yeah, tangy times. Go on, sorry.
The final thing I want to ask is, how much do you think things might have changed? This is obviously mainly speculation, as I don't think any of us know many secondary school age kids, but do you think it's changed?
Well, obviously, having gone back and then worked at school for almost as long as I was a student there, I do have a little bit of experience at looking at it in later years. And like I said earlier, the run-up to joining a secondary school now is much more complete. It starts a lot earlier. There's a lot more chances to go and get acclimatised. You'd already know the teaching staff very well before you join. You probably know the layout of the building a bit more. And when I speak to like Dad of the Pod or people like that about what their experiences were on their first day, and I'm sure he'll probably write in and let us know after he's heard this episode, but there was even less for him than there was for me. Like, I think it was literally, okay, you've left that school, now you turn up here on this day, and that was it. I think, you knew what uniform to get, but that was it. It was all done on that first day, and you had to learn from there. And I think we're now at a place where kids feel a lot more confident making the step up from primary to secondary because they've had that longer run up, and that can only be a good thing. I wouldn't want anybody to sort of feel like I did it in the run up about certain people, certain rumours I'd heard, certain things, and thinking I wouldn't know where to go or anything, and as Adam said, feeling like everyone else knew what they were doing but you didn't. I feel like that sort of thing maybe is a thing of the past now, and that can only be a good thing. So I hope that answers your question.
I imagine that bits of it have improved and bits of it have got worse in different ways. I guess with social media and smartphones, there's probably less of an escape from being bullied if you are being bullied. But I like to imagine that young people these days are a bit more accepting of people from the LGBTQ community. So yeah, I don't know. Some improvement, some not improvement.
Yeah, I think from some previous work that I've done, previous job roles I've had, I think it's much more acceptable to be LGBTQ plus in secondary school now. Because I would do some work in secondary schools every now and again, and I knew there were students who were openly gay, openly trans even, or non-binary, and that just would not have happened in my day. That felt like a real positive step. I'm sure it's not perfect, but that was a positive. And yeah, like you say, I think phones must have changed everything. I really hope that kids do still kick a tennis ball against the wall at lunchtime, or just talk about whatever they watched on TV last night or whatever bands they're into. I really hope that still happens and they don't just all sit on their phone and, do their own thing in their own world. And maybe that makes me sound old, and that would be really sad to me if that had been lost completely to the smartphone.
No, I think that's a good sentiment to have, mate. And I'll add to that. I hope that there are still bands being formed in secondary schools as well, which happened all the time in my time there. And that sort of thing does seem to have dropped off a bit now. But I hope that's another thing that's still happening, and that kids are still getting together and playing guitar and stuff as well. I'd like to think that's still happening.
Yeah, and you know what? I hope there are still some kids out there who can put their phone to one side for 5 minutes and just smear a little bit of excrement on the toilet wall. Like, if that's all I hope for,
Good, wholesome activities for lunchtimes. That's what we want.
Yeah.
What a lovely place to end it. Thanks so much for joining us, Adam. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. We will have you back soon, I'm sure. Before you go, a quick word on Jimmy's Cricket's form at the moment. How's things looking in the league?
Well, we've played 3 games as we record, and we are currently second in the league.
Oh, fantastic.
Wow.
It was 10 years ago that we started our first tournament team, so we'll have to do something to celebrate that at some point.
Well, it's a pleasure for us to be sponsoring you in this 10th anniversary season. I had to say, Jeff was saying in one of our very infrequent business meetings that, if form for the team didn't have an uptick soon, then we would have to pull out. But it sounds like that's had it was a desired effect, and everything's now looking rosy at the top of the table. So long may it continue. And I would suggest not picking me in goal if you would like that to continue.
There's always a spot on the bench if you ever want to come up.
I'll see what I can do. Many thanks to Adam for joining us to kick off this run of episodes with a look back at our school days. I really enjoyed that. Once we started talking, the juices really got flowing, and there was so much more stuff that I remembered than I hadn't written down. I never even got round to getting to ask anything about Mr. Constantine, who was the head teacher before I joined, but maybe we can save that for another time. We've got some correspondence on this, actually, haven't we, Alex?
Yes, we do. I have a message here from Teresa Stenson, friend of the pod and official teenage diarist of the pod. And Teresa says, in relation to her school memories, I feel some of these could be universal experiences. Science teachers trying to impress a class by burning a strip of magnesium. Definitely remember that. That being the best thing. And did you also watch this video in Science where it showed someone dropping different metals into a glass or a tank of water, and each one would get progressively more spectacular? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, no.
That was a big one. It culminated in cesium, and this person just dropped like a little drop of it into this water tank, and it just exploded the tank. That was always fun.
The big finish.
Yeah. Back to Teresa's message. Someone fainting in assembly, just hearing a distant thud as they went down. Someone else puking in assembly, and once at school that made another kid puke. Luckily it didn't escalate further.
Hang on. I had to borrow Tamlin Goodrich's trousers once.
Did you?
Yeah, this isn't technically, this is primary school, but this is just before we're leaving primary school. In fact, I think we were performing our year 6 leavers play that day, and somebody had been sick in the hall and it had been cleaned up. But then we went into rehearse, and I sat in the spot where the sick had been, but the smell was still there.
Oh, gross.
And I absolutely stank. And we were supposed to be doing this play that afternoon. And I remember saying, I can't perform, because it was part of my costume. I was playing a scientist. I can't perform in these. And Tamlin came to the rescue because he was wearing a full costume and didn't need his trousers, so I borrowed his. And yeah, blimey, that's come flooding back. If you'll pardon the expression, that's come flooding back.
Oh dear. The PE changing room stinking of Lynx for the boys or Impulse for the girls. Yeah, definitely. People went absolutely mad with the voodoo in those PE changing rooms every time. Those moments at break time when everyone would suddenly start running into a certain direction shouting scrap because a fight had broken out at the other end of the playground. The cool art teacher letting you bring a mixtape in to listen to on the cassette player during class. Teachers getting married to each other during the summer holidays, and the tuck shop selling mostly Space Raiders and Chomps. So yeah, very nice memory setters. Definitely some of them that have brought back memories for me, and I'm sure will for a lot of our listeners.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've got some correspondence here from our old friend Mark from Glasgow. Lovely to hear from you again, Mark. He says, I started secondary school in 1999. The big thing at the time in Scotland was the Scottish comedy programme Chewing the Fat, parts of which were filmed at my school. A popular phrase from the time was, oh dear, shall I try the accent? I don't want to offend Mark.
I think you've got to, really.
Gonna nae do that. No, that's... No. I don't want to go full out because I think I will offend him, and I don't want to do that. So it's oh, forget it. But thanks, Mark, for getting in touch.
We'll insert a clip here if we've got one. If we
yes,
don't,
please do.
If we don't, then there just won't be a clip.
Christ's sake, please do.
Only no do that.
We very much enjoyed reading those messages about your secondary school memories. Alex, if anybody has any secondary school memories they'd like to contribute from the 90s, or anything they'd like to write in to us about from any other episodes they've listened to recently, how can they get in touch with us?
They can find us on our link tree, which is linked to in the episode description below, and has links to our Instagram, our email address, our X, which may not be there for that much longer. We shall see. And yes, just contact us on there, and we would love to hear from you about any topic you want to talk about.
Absolutely, we love hearing from you, so please do keep those messages coming in. Well, it's lovely to be back, isn't it? And we are going to be back from now until infinity, or at least until the next time we decide to take a break. Next time, we will be reviewing the recent BBC documentary about Loaded magazine, so you can look forward to that in a couple of weeks. Don't forget the 90s night at the Three Crowns in Chippenham on Saturday the 15th of February, and our forthcoming appearance on Now That's What I Call Bullshit with Catherine and Dan. We would very much love it if you could get involved with those as well. But until next time, it's goodbye from me. I'm just off to climb on the roof of my house and shout at some passers-by with a loud hailer.
And it's goodbye from me. I'm just off to retrieve my backpack from behind the vending machines in the S-Block Hall.
School's back in!
Goodbye.
Bye for now. Many, many thanks. Oh dear, no, that sounded very Michael McIntyre, didn't it? We certainly cannot have that. Okay.